Beneath Yellowstone's beautiful geysers and steaming hot springs sits one of the largest volcanic systems on the planet, a chamber of molten rock tens of miles across. It is a supervolcano, capable of an eruption thousands of times larger than a normal one. And it has done exactly that, 3 times, roughly 2 million, 1 1/3 million, and 640,000 years ago. That last number is the reason you've heard Yellowstone is overdue. Hold on to that word, overdue, because it is the single biggest myth in this entire story. Before we go further, one number to keep in mind: the scale. Eruptions are measured by explosivity, and a full Yellowstone eruption would sit at magnitude 8, the very top of the scale, throwing out more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of rock and ash. That is roughly 1,000 times the eruption that buried Pompeii. Keep that gap in your head as we walk through what would actually happen. It would not strike without warning. In the months and probably years beforehand, the ground itself would begin to change. Swarms of earthquakes would ripple through the region as magma forced its way upward. The land would visibly bulge and rise as the chamber swelled beneath it. Geysers would shift their rhythm. New steam vents would tear open, and the gases seeping from the earth would surge. Scientists monitor every bit of this around the clock. But here is the catch. Yellowstone does all of this all the time. It breathes, swells, and trembles constantly without ever erupting. Unrest is not eruption, and telling the two apart is the hardest problem of all. Then, the moment. The roof of the magma chamber finally gives way. The immense pressure pinning everything down is released all at once, and the ground tears open along a ring several miles wide. A column of ash, gas, and shattered rock blasts upward at hundreds of miles an hour, punching tens of miles into the sky, far higher than any airliner flies. At the center, the ground collapses inward, forming a fresh caldera, a crater dozens of miles across, swallowing everything that stood there. In the first hours, the true killer arrives. Parts of that towering column grow too heavy to hold themselves up and crash back down as pyroclastic flows, avalanches of superheated gas and ash racing outward faster than a car, hot enough to incinerate everything they touch. Anything within roughly 100 miles is buried and gone. This is the zone where nothing survives. Beyond it, in every direction, the sky begins to darken as the ash spreads out across the land. Over the next days, that ash comes down. Carried on the wind, a grey blanket settles across the continent. Close to the eruption, it piles meters deep. But even 1,000 miles away, cities are smothered in inches of it, and ash is far heavier and nastier than snow. It caves in roofs. It shorts out power grids and electronics. It turns to wet cement in engines and in human lungs. Every aircraft on the continent is grounded. And worst of all, it buries the farmland of an entire nation, the breadbasket that feeds hundreds of millions of people in a matter of days. And then the whole world gets colder. The eruption hurls millions of tons of sulfur high into the stratosphere, where it spreads into a veil that wraps around the planet and reflects sunlight straight back into space. Over the following months, global temperatures drop by several degrees. Summers simply fail to arrive. Harvests collapse, not only in America, but everywhere on Earth, all at the same time. We have seen a faint preview of this. In 1815, a far smaller eruption in Indonesia caused the year without a summer, with snow falling in June and famine spreading across the northern hemisphere. A Yellowstone eruption would be that, magnified and stretched across years. So how afraid should you actually be? Here is the honest answer, and it is the opposite of the headline. A full Yellowstone super eruption is one of the least likely disasters you will ever hear about. The overdue idea is simply false. These eruptions do not run on a timer. The gaps between the last three were not even equal, and there may not be enough eruptible magma down there to do it again at all. Scientists put the odds in any given year at around 1 in 700,000. You are far more likely to be touched by an ordinary earthquake or by one of Yellowstone's much smaller steam explosions than by anything resembling the apocalypse. And even if it did happen, it would not be the end of our species. Humanity has already lived through a super eruption. Toba, 74,000 years ago. And here we still are. It would be the hardest test civilization has ever faced. But the hardest test is not extinction. So the next time you see a headline screaming that Yellowstone is about to blow, remember what is really down there. Not a doomsday clock counting down, but a slow, ancient, closely watched giant that has been quietly sleeping for 600,000 years and will most likely keep sleeping long after we are gone. If this changed how you think about the ground beneath your feet, subscribe, because the next question we're taking apart is just as close to home as this one.